Alright everyone, we're going to talk today about the fight that was announced. Well, it was today for us, but it'll probably be tomorrow now by the time this is up. Nathan Cleverly versus Tony Bellew, the rematch from their fight a few years ago. It's going to be on in November, on the 22nd, and much to everyone's, I'd say, anger, very controversially, it's been made a pay-per-view fight. I'm going to talk about it now with Mark and Rory. So, is there, lads?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, sound. Well, let's just jump straight into it then. Is this fight worthy of pay-per-view? Based on is the main event a pay-per-view fight? A lot of people are not happy about it at all. They're going absolutely crazy at Eddie Hearn and Sky. I'll let you answer first, Rory. Mate, go on. Is this fight pay-per-view? Is this main event something you'd pay for?
No, and it's something I'm not going to pay for. You look at sort of the last so many British pay-per-view fights. You've got the likes of Froch Groves, Froch Groves 2, which was the biggest boxing audience post-war at Wembley Stadium. Fine if you're getting that sort of audience and that sort of crowd. Yeah, that's kind of in there. You've got Froch Kessler 2, which is a rematch of two well-known, world-known world champions, or a former world champion in Kessler. So yeah, you can kind of see that. You compare those two fights to this, where it's two guys who have only had 2 fights at the weight, 2 or maybe 3 fights, who neither have a world title. One of them's never been a world champion. The other one was a world champion at a different weight. And you compare that to the last 2 pay-per-view fights in this country, and you just see how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, fair points, mate. What about you, Mark? Is this a pay-per-view main event? Is it worthy of it, or is everyone right to be pissed off?
Everyone's right to be annoyed. It's not a pay-per-view fight. I mean, if you just look at Bellew and Cleverly, what are their best opponents they have fought? They're both guys that they've lost to. Right?
Yeah.
Cleverly lost to Kovalev, and Bellew lost to Adonis Stevenson. Now, if you
didn't just lose.
They got knocked out. That's the point. They got knocked out.
Yeah, they got destroyed.
But that's not the point. The point I'm trying to make is Kovalev versus Stevenson on HBO wouldn't be pay-per-view. So why the hell are the two losers in a weight where they're fatter, more shot at this point in their career, and they've got nowhere else to go between them except for themselves? Why is that a pay-per-view fight? I don't understand it. Like Rory said, they fought 2 guys at this weight limit. Both of the guys they fought were the same level of this Russian guy called Usyk that I've been looking at recently. He's a Russian amateur guy, and he's fighting guys with their same level in like his fourth or fifth fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand, mate. Yeah.
I don't understand. I can't fathom it myself.
Well,
it's not a pay-per-view fight. The main event is not a pay-per-view fight. No.
Yeah, I understand. I agree completely. It's not a pay-per-view fight. It's disgusting, quite frankly. That's the only answer. It's the only way I can describe it. We know that there is some interest in the fight. Alright, it's not everyone is going mad and jumping up and down eager to see it. But there are some people, mostly from our neck of the woods in Liverpool, who would like to see the fight because they all love Bellew and they all don't like Cleverly, and they all, they've been to the last few cards. They went to that last show in July, I think it was, and had both of them on the card, and they both had a bit of back and forth at the end, and all the fans were standing up cheering. Eddie Hearn and everyone else at Sky, they've seen that reaction, their eyes have lit up, they've seen pound signs, they think, you know what, we can get these gullible people to probably spend money on this fight now. They want to see it that much that we can probably charge them £15 and they'll pay out for it. And the last fight that they had when they were both light heavyweights a couple of years ago, that was a good fight. I enjoyed it. It was a very close fight, and maybe this fight will be good as well. Maybe it might even be better than the last fight because they're both more comfortable at the weight. But it's not pay-per-view at all. It's really, really appalling that Sky have even okayed this as a pay-per-view. As you said, both are more shot. They're both further down. They're not. hideously shot. They're both not finished fighters, in my opinion. But they're both at the point in their careers where their best chance at winning a world title and going far, that's probably gone now, to be perfectly honest. They're both scrabbling around looking for a fight to keep them relevant, because both of them are teetering on the edge of irrelevancy, because they both, let's face it, they both only fought one world level fighter each in their career, and they were both absolutely smashed to bits. Stevenson smashed Bellew and Kovalev smashed Cleverly. So, no, it's not a pay-per-view. It's basically two, I wouldn't call them losers, because that's harsh, but it's basically two guys who are not very relevant in British boxing at the minute, because they're both coming off bad losses. They've both had a couple of warm-up fights in a new division. That's all it is. It's basically just Sky and Eddie Hearn and whoever else seeing all these people in Liverpool who've gone mad at seeing Bellew and Cleverly have an argument at ringside, and they thought, you know what, we'll get some money off these people. But we'll move on to another question I've got for you now. Eddie Hearn, on his interviews today, was basically trying to justify that this is a pay-per-view, not only because of the main event and how it's apparently one of the biggest grudge matches in the history of British boxing, or some rubbish like that. He also said that the undercard is apparently something great, and that this card couldn't be made without pay-per-view because the undercard is that good. Now, I'll go through the undercard with yous. We've got Scott Quigg defending his crappy WBA belt. At least it's a crappy WBA belt in my opinion. He's making a defence of that against Joseph Abeko. What do you think of that fight? Just tell me whether you think it's good or bad, quickly. Rory?
Okay. I'm not going to say it's good, not going to say it's bad. It's an okay fight. It's better than some of his recent opponents, but it's not brilliant.
Alright.
What about you, Mark? Do you like that fight, or is it not special?
I don't mind that fight because he's just fought Rigondeaux. You know, Rigondeaux battered him. We didn't really give Rigondeaux tons of abuse for it, so I can't really give Scott Quigg a load of abuse, and it's a step down compared to, Rigondeaux for Agbeko, and it's probably going to be Quigg's hardest opponent of his career up to now, Joseph Agbeko, even though he's older, and he's not as good as he used to be and stuff, but I'm going to give him a pass for that. That's an okay fight.
Oh, okay, fair enough. We'll give that one a pass. That's a half-decent fight, but we'll go through the rest of the fights. We've got Jamie McDonnell defending his crappy WBA belt against a guy called Gualberto Ramos from Colombia, a guy who started off at minimum weight, has mostly fought at light flyweight the last couple of years, and for anyone who doesn't know, I'll just read this guy's record off for you now. He's won 23, lost 6, drawn 2, but in the last, let me just scan through his box right now, in the last 7 years, since 2007, he has fought one person with a winning record. Everyone else has just been journeymen. The last guy he fought had something like 9 losses. Guy before that had 31 losses. There's a guy on there who he fought back in 2013 who had 39 losses. This is basically just some Colombian nomad. We've never heard of him before. We're never going to hear from him again. I don't know where they've come up with this guy. I don't know where they've picked him from. Because, like I said, we've never heard of him before. Jamie McDonnell's going to fight him. Have you got any thoughts on that, lads? Rory?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of go on that guy as well, it's ridiculous. The guy also didn't fight from what was February 2009 until May 2013. So even within those 7 years, he's had, a 4 and a bit year hiatus away from boxing. Considering that they want to try and justify Jamie McDonnell as a legitimate world champion, it's not how you do it. It's going to be, without getting into it, it's going to be another Scott Quigg scenario, I can see.
What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, there's no defending that fight, really. I mean, it's not a good fight. It's just some guy. It's just another Eddie Hearn fight, innit? Another Eddie's import. What you see
exactly,
on every single show up and down Eddie Hearn's Sky Matchroom thing, they bring in some foreign guy with a pumped up record of guys who've got like 20 losses, 5 wins, and the guy beats on them for a few rounds. So
yeah, I mean,
that's what it's like.
Sorry to interrupt as well. Even to make it even more ridiculous, one of the guys this guy's beaten had a 0-20 record. A 0-20. So someone this guy beat, and it wasn't like his starting out fight we're talking perhaps sort of 19th fight, they put him in with someone who had already lost 20 times, no draws, no wins. It's mental.
Mm-hmm. If you've got 20 losses, right, no wins, you should really start to wonder if this is the right game for you. You know what I mean?
I know.
And if you're reduced to fighting guys with 20 losses, 0 wins
in your 19th-ish fight,
yeah, I'm not talking about your first 6 or 7 fights. Then you ain't going far either. He's not going to turn down the chance to fight for a world title. He can maybe
he's not
a Hail Mary punch, but at the end of the day, what else can you say? It's going to be an easy fight for Jamie McDonnell, but it's not going to do nothing for him. And at the end of it, everyone's still going to call him a cunt and a paper champion. Yeah, that was a bit harsh, but they go hand in hand. Cunt, paper champion, cunt, paper champion.
Yeah. So basically, this guy is he's someone we've never heard of. He's coming over for his steak dinner and his 5-star hotel, like all these foreigners who Eddie brings over, and then he's probably just going to be sent home again. And he'll never be in a fight, never on a fight on TV that we'll ever watch ever again.
No.
So that's officially a god-awful fight. It's indefensible.
Definitely.
Next one, Anthony Joshua, the People's Champion, or whatever it is you want to call him, the next big hope. He's fighting Michael Sprott. The heavyweight who's been around for a while. He's either in good form or he's in bad form. He wins a couple, then he loses a couple, and that's the way his career's been for the last few years. Are we interested in that at all, Rory?
It's a decent enough fight. I'd probably say it's, similar to an extent as a sort of Matt Skelton fight. It's probably the right sort of level of opponent, even though Sprott is ridiculously short. It doesn't really add or take anything away from it as a pay-per-view card. You can see why it's on there. It's all right, but it's one of those fights that, because of Joshua's notoriety as an Olympic champion, and brilliant, credit to him. But I mean, how many fights have he had now? What, 5, 6?
Yeah, I've got 7 or 8.
7 or 8. So it's the right sort of fight for him. If he's on a pay-per-view card, then he should be the first one on there. The one whereby you've only got like 20 fans at ringside kind of jobs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I hope that's where he is. But looking at the rest of the card, which we'll get onto now, I could see him being, not far off third from the top of the bill. And that makes it ridiculous if that's the kind of, scenario that we're going to have.
You got any thoughts on that fight, Mark? Is it something you're interested in, or is it just another crap fight?
Don't mind the fight in theory. I mean, it's a okay fight. Sprott, he gives a good go every now and again, but I think his best days are behind him, like I said. And the only other thing I've got to say about that is, the only thing I dislike about it is people, right, are saying that he's up here. You know what I mean? At the very top. He's the best prospect in the world. Right, well, Lomachenko's fought for a world title in two fights. He's got his world title in 3. People like this Usyk guy are fighting the type of competition that Tony Bellew's fighting right now. Okay? I've just watched Tavoris Crowd get sparked out by another Olympic champion. Okay?
Yep.
Now, if they're doing that, and apparently Anthony Joshua's up there with them, shouldn't he be fighting the same type of competition they are?
Well, I think well, I wouldn't say excuse, because it's a pretty valid reason. The reason they'll give for the reason that he's not is because he hasn't got as much amateur experience as those guys who all have hundreds of fights.
That's true. I think the other, that's honest reason, and it's not hating, it's just stating the obvious, is he's not as good as them. He's not as good as he's built
not yet, no.
He's a very good prospect, and as a heavyweight, I think he's got a bright future, but he's being overhyped. That's it. Right.
I agree with that. Okay. Well, 2 other fights on the card are Stephen Smith and James DeGale, but we don't know their opponents yet, and they're probably not going to be anyone any good if those 2 are apparently
TBA.
Apparently both of them are going to be fighting for the world title soon, so I don't imagine their opponents will be anything. And the last fight we can talk about on it is Callum Smith versus, now I can't for the life of me say this guy's name, Nicholas Saloka. I hope I've done that justice.
Yeah, Saloka's alright, yeah.
If anyone doesn't know what we mean, he fought Arthur Abraham earlier on this year, took him 12 rounds. but lost on a decision. And in 2013, he took Sakio Bika 12 rounds as well, but lost pretty much every round in both fights. Is that a decent fight for Callum Smith at this point? Is it a good step up, good test? Is it something that it is that something that you're going to stick on a pay-per-view card and say, yeah, that's a good fight?
It is what it is. Again, it's like the Joshua fight, kind of, really. I'd say that it's a good fight where both fighters are. To go in against someone who fought Abraham and took Abraham 12 rounds, decent enough test. That's quite a legitimate fight for Smith. However, it's one of those that shouldn't really be on a pay-per-view card. And again, if it is, it's not one of those fights that should be televised. Do you know what I mean? And again, I think it will be. So, yeah, it's a decent enough fight. Yes, it's probably a bit of a learning experience for Smith. Yes, it's probably a fight that is good for him at the minute. Should it be on a pay-per-view? Only if it's right at the beginning of the pay-per-view and you've got another 6 or 7 much better fights on top of it. And that's not the case, so it shouldn't be on there.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, Rory. You got anything to add,
Yeah,
Mark?
I disagree. I think that's going to be an okay fight. That might be the best fight of the night. Do you remember when he fought? Who was that guy I got a picture with?
Biase or something like that.
Yeah, Biase. His name is Vladimir.
Andrade's mate.
Yeah, Vladimir. When he fought him, don't forget, like, Vladimir been battered by Durrell. He got stopped by he did get
battered. He got beat by Durrell after Callum Smith.
Yeah, he got battered by, what's his name? He got stopped by the guy who got stopped by Porky Medina too. He got stopped by J. Leon Love, the porn star name guy. That's the one, right? He got stopped by him as well, and then he took him a distance. So it wasn't a bad fight, and it wasn't a one-sided fight. And I've never heard of this Sloka guy before tonight. So other than the Abraham fight, so I don't really know what to get from him. So that might be the better fight tonight, because Callum Smith, don't forget, he's also one of these overhyped fighters where he's God's gift, but I have a feeling someday he'll get caught. I don't think it'll be this fight, but we may find a lot more about him.
Maybe. Alright, well, we've been through the undercard. We'll answer the original question now. Do you agree with Eddie Hearn? Is that undercard so great that it justifies a pay-per-view? Just give me a yes or no, and maybe just a couple of thoughts. We'll try and keep it short and sweet. What about you, Rory? Does that blow your mind, that undercard?
Certainly not. Certainly shouldn't be on a pay-per-view card. I would say, however, that it's probably better than the average sort of Saturday night Sky boxing cards, but not by much. And if you're expecting people to pay more than what they already pay to get Sky Sport anyway for that, then it's ridiculous.
What about you, Mark? Is that a card that apparently gets you pissing your pants in excitement, like Eddie Hearn is making out like it is?
No, but it's better than his usual dribble. And I'll tell you something else that he said, Eddie Hearn. Last time he said people don't buy the pay-per-view to watch the undercard, they only want to see the main event. So I'm going to take that question back to the original question, which was, is the main event good enough for pay-per-view? And I'm going to put it down like this. Sky is a subscription. HBO is a subscription. Canelo versus Clottey is on free subscription HBO. Okay? This fight is on box office pay-per-view. Who's got the better deal?
The Americans by a mile. Well, alright then. We've talked a bit about the pay-per-view and whether we like it or not, whether we justify it or not. But we'll move on to Tony Bellew and Cleverly more specifically now before we finish. Is this the only real interesting fight for either guy at this point in their career? Do these two need each other at this point? Because Bellew and Cleverly have said it themselves, but Eddie Hearn said it more publicly. He's basically saying that this is the biggest fight in the division. It's the biggest domestic fight that's available in Britain right now. It's going to be a massive grudge match. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. Is it this fight basically? There's two parts to this question. Is this fight half as big as it's being made out to be by Sky and people like that? And is Nathan Cleverly the only fight for Tony Bellew? And is Tony Bellew the only fight for Nathan Cleverly? I'll let you start this time, Mark.
Okay, well, to the second part of the question, which was, do they need each other, basically? Yeah, they do. I don't see where either of these guys are going without each other. You know what I mean? Because They're both waiting. They're both on borrowed time. That's what it is. They're both waiting for the loss. They're on borrowed time. So you may as well get all the hype together, shove them in the ring together, and then move one on to try and get a world title shot. And at that point, they'll cash out on the other one too. So either way, they're both going to get cashed out on soon. It's just one of them's going to get an extra payday in between. What was the first part of the question?
Is this fight half as big as Sky are making it out to be? It's calling it the biggest domestic fight in Britain.
In terms of the whole division, no. I mean, basically, these are insignificant in terms of the whole division. We've just seen that Polish guy get beat by the Russian guy Drozd. Lebedev's got his title. Hook's messing around with whatever he's got right now. He might vacate. And then there's someone else I'm missing, Hernandez. He's got a title too. Do I see any of them losing to Cleverly or Bellew? That's definitely a no. And there's like the European guys, the Russian guys, the guys like Usyk that I've just been talking about who's in the same division as these. No. These guys are, in terms of division, insignificant. Are they the biggest fight in the UK? Well, yeah, but that doesn't say much because the cruiserweight division in the UK has always been dog shit.
No, Eddie Hearn is saying this is pretty much what he said. He said it's the biggest domestic fight in Britain, full stop. At the moment,
as in every single.
That's what I read in his Daily Mail article, or whatever it was.
As in,
I don't mean bigger than any fight ever. I mean it's the biggest fight that can be made right now. Bigger than Quigg Frampton? Would it be bigger than Quigg Galahad? No. That would be because that would be for that. All right, I don't like it. I don't call it a world title, but I guess on paper that Galahad versus Frampton or Quigg would be for the world title. This fight's not for any title, I don't believe.
That's right, and also I'm thinking about it. Tyson Fury, Chisora is bigger than that fight. No, they moved it so they didn't have to compete with it. What else is there? Fury versus Price, that would be a bigger fight. Like I said, it's only the biggest fight in the division because the rest of our domestic division's dog shit. The next best guy is Steven Simmons, and he's fighting a guy against the guy with 6 losses.
And that's not even on TV, I don't think. Wow.
That's the number 3 cruiserweight in the UK, minus Oval McKenzie, who will be a good fight for them.
All right, Rory, we'll let you have your go now. First part of the question is you can answer either part of the question first if you want to, but the questions are: is this fight half as big a deal as it's being made out to be? Because Sky are making out like it's the biggest grudge match since Frazier Ali. And second part of the question is does Bellew need Cleverly and does Cleverly need Bellew? Are they basically just cashing out on each other?
Yeah. First part of the question, in terms of whether or not it's the thing, like you said, what Hearn came out and said was that it's the biggest fight that can be made domestically in this country. If I think you've kind of gone through some of the comparisons, but Quigg Frampton's bigger, Fury Chisora's bigger. I'd argue that Carnbrook,
yeah, we forgot about that.
I'd even say that a DeGale and Groves rematch would be bigger.
Yeah.
Where I would kind of class this fight is on a similar level as if some of the domestic lightweights, British lightweights, fought each other. So the likes of, say, Crawler, well, Burns has stepped up now, but Crawler, Mitchell, that sort of level. That's sort of how I would say it's on a par with. Neither have world titles.
Neither don't like challenge for world titles either.
Yeah, exactly. It's that sort of standard. So there's at least 4 or 5 fights that could be made, or Brooks injured. But that could be made. I would probably argue none of them would justify pay-per-view. But I would say they were bigger and more interesting fights. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like this fight on paper. It's a good fight. It's a fight that's been in the making for a good few years.
Yeah, I agree.
The first one.
Last fight was a good fight as well, and this one probably is.
It's a fight I want to see, but it doesn't justify me paying more. I mean, let's be honest as well, people. It's 15 quid for this fight is what's being quoted. Not only that though, but people who have Sky Sports, they pay 20 something quid for Sky, and they pay roughly another 15 to £20. So roughly 40 quid a month to get Sky Sports. There or thereabouts. So That's £40 a month of our hard-earned money that we're getting to see what is, in essence. It's not like we get boxing once a week like we do with football. We get boxing shows perhaps once every 3 weeks, perhaps once every 2 weeks, something around that throughout the year. So you're paying 40 quid for a couple of shows a month. So it just doesn't justify it. There's far bigger fights domestically, and even they shouldn't be pay-per-view. The only one out of that I would argue could be pay-per-view, and this would only be because of perhaps sort of size of venues and and stadia and stuff that it could sell, would be Brookcon. Even Frampton Quig, I wouldn't say should be pay-per-view. Maybe at a push. Second part of the question. Both of them only had 2 or 3 fights at the weight, so they're not sort of necessarily overly highly ranked. So they're not in line. They're not a mandatory challenger to any world title. So again, this is the best financially. This is the best fight either of them could have had.
We'll move on to the final question now that I've got for the both of you, and it's a nice and simple one. Is Eddie Hearn just a lying con man, and who just bullshits the fans and wants your money? After all of the, I only put mega fights on pay-per-view, what was the other one? Pay-per-view has to have mega undercards. We can put all the effort in the world into making great undercards for pay-per-view fights. After George Groves versus James DeGale, that should never have been pay-per-view because it was only a domestic level fight. Pay-per-view should have world titles, and if we're going to have pay-per-view at all. Is he just a bullshitting liar? A con man who wants your money, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. I've always give Eddie Hearn like a shot. You know what I mean? Like, I've not thrown him under the bus when like other people have. I mean, like our mate Chris, he's always having a good moan about it whenever he can. But at the end of the day, he's right. You know, Eddie Hearn said no pay-per-view. First thing he does is bring back pay-per-view. You know, okay, now, I'll give him a pass because Froch is, like, pay-per-view worthy. But they didn't make Froch Butte pay-per-view. But they had to make Groves Froch pay-per-view. Froch Groves 1, I'm talking about, pay-per-view. There's no need. It ended up being a good fight, okay. And the second one was pay-per-view. I'll give you that. But why is this pay-per-view? I don't understand. Why have you had to make this one pay-per-view? He's got an answer for everything. Even if he contradicts himself, he'll end up lying about not lying.
Sorry to interrupt. For me, it's got to the point where Eddie Hearn would rather climb up a tree and tell you a lie than stay on the floor and tell the truth. Because everything that comes out of his mouth nowadays is just contradicting something he said a year ago or 6 months ago. Like I said, I only put mega fights on pay-per-view. Only world title fights can be pay-per-view. All pay-per-view undercards have got to be amazing. If he said all that a year ago, why is he saying something completely different now?
Exactly. Let me weigh in for a minute. If he said it's got to be an amazing undercard, why is it he then comes out and says, oh, people don't buy the pay-per-view for the undercard, when he's got a shit undercard on it? Oh, people don't buy it for the undercard. They don't want the main event. Then put on a good main event. Can't even do that. Alright, this is a good main event. And if this is such a good pay-per-view, if this is such a good pay-per-view, okay, why do you have to move the date from Fiore Chisora? Why do you move it away from it? Because if it's such a good pay-per-view and the demand is so high, people will just go and buy the pay-per-view for Cleverly versus Bellew and just leave Chisora and Fiore on their own. But that's the point. It's not. There isn't a massive demand. People like that fight. Some people like the Chisora fight. Some people like the Cleverly fight. Doesn't matter. The point is, it's not pay-per-view worthy. If Fiore versus Chisora isn't pay-per-view worthy, then how's this fight? Or here's another one I've got for you. If Cleverly versus Bellew 1 wasn't pay-per-view, how was this one?
Stumped me, mate, to be honest. I know Eddie Hearn came up with some rubbish today about, Bellew versus Cleverly was originally going to be on the pay-per-view, on a Frank Warren pay-per-view, but then it fell through when he put it on Box Nation. You've got to remember, when the fight was first going to be made, back when they had that mad press conference, that was on the undercard to James DeGale, George Groves. And it was a last-minute thing. It was like Frank Warren put Tony Bellew in against Nathan Cleverly at the very last minute to try and save the show. So it wasn't like he took months to plan it and he had to convince a lot of people. He just threw it in last minute to keep the show going. Whereas they're going to spend months now trying to convince people.
Well, they've got 6 weeks. They've got 6 weeks.
All right, let's have Rory have his go now. Go on, Rory.
So we're going to say anything with that as well, just to kind of touch on that point. Bellew wasn't the second choice opponent. Bellew was the third choice opponent to fight Cleverly, because Cleverly's original opponent pulled out. His replacement opponent then pulled out, and Bellew was brought in with something ridiculous like 3 days' notice, and then that's when it all kicked off. So, like you said, it wasn't some sort of master stroke. It was just, let's be honest, it was pretty much potluck that they got a guy, in Bellew who was gobby and can, in essence, and I say this in inverted commas, sell a fight and give it all the aggro and give it all the big uns and make people notice. A bit like Tyson Fury, to an extent. And it just so happened that when the fight then eventually did come around to happening, they'd already kind of half sold it because of all the antics, and then it turned out to be a pretty decent fight. So in essence, it's Eddie Hearn's making a pay-per-view fight of something that Frank Warren put the grounds to. To answer the kind of Hearn question, I think the way I look at Eddie Hearn is a bit of, sort of an Essex wide boy. I mean, and this isn't meant to be derogatory to anyone who's from Essex, nothing like that. But you kind of think of the stereotypical only way is Essex kind of lad, sort of like a bit of a Jack the Lad kind of bloke. And I think the reason people buy into it is because he's, whether or not it's intentional, or whether or not it's a PR thing, he's sold and he comes across in terms of a personality as the everyman. So the kind of guy you'd have a drink in the pub, the kind of guy who's a bit of a lad who likes Leyton Orient and likes his football, and he's sold as this kind of figure to general sports fans. Not necessarily die-hard boxing fans, but let's just say sports fans. Guys in their mid to late teens to early 30s who kind of look at Eddie Hearn as, just one of the lads, and you see him when he's doing interviews with Kuhn Cassius and that's kind of the image he's trying to portray. But let's be honest and let's get these facts straight. This guy earns tons of money. He, from a company that his dad set up that was originally to do with snooker, this guy's now earning absolute sense of money, basically having a monopoly over a lot of Sky Sports and what's shown on there. It's not just boxing, it's darts, and he's got sort of fingers in different pies. He's, like you said, he's a bit of a chancer. If he can make a few bob or two, then he's going to make a few bob or two. And if he's going to rope what is so-called friends by, come on mate, you can have a photo with me, it's all good buddy, it's all good, but as long as you pay your 15 quid to watch this, then I'm your mate, then it's good. Because let's all be honest as well, we've seen him with different fighters and he's all pally and all nicey, and that's to an extent what a promoter should be. But he's also easy to throw fighters under the bus. Look at the likes of Lee Purdy. He's easy to, to dismiss fighters and not have their best interests at heart. So all of that adds up to kind of show the type of bloke he is, whereby, and there's going to be pretty strong words, but he's a two-faced liar who will be as friendly to anyone as long as he can make money out of you. And that's why he's in the game, to make money. And if he can sell Bellew cleverly as a pay-per-view fight, you know what, I'm sticking with Beverly. That's what it's going to be.
If Bellew and Cleverly had a baby.
Yeah, Beverly. And if he can sell it to you and make an extra 15 quid on top of the contract he's got with Sky to put on fights, then he's going to do it. And you're all going to sort of fall into his trap of him thinking, oh, he's a top bloke, Eddie, he's brilliant, he's the kind of guy I'd have a pint with, he'd buy me around, he's got my best, he doesn't give a shit. As long as you're making him money, that's the bottom line of it. He's the kind of guy who'd sell his grandma. The best analogy I could use with Eddie Hearn is like a Del Boy that isn't likeable. That's what he's like. Yeah, there we go, Boise.
Yeah, mate, absolutely spot on. I agree with that.
Sky, HBO, and Box Nation are all subscription things, yeah? Subscription based. Canelo versus Clotty's on the free subscription. Chisora versus Fury's on the free subscription. And Beverly's on the pay-per-view. How can you justify that?
You can't, mate. Simple as that. We've all had a nice long rant at Eddie Hearn, at Sky, at this fight being pay-per-view. We've all made our thoughts clear. We have ran a while, but we will wrap it up now. Thanks for listening, guys. It's been a long one. Give us your thoughts on this. Are you going to buy this pay-per-view? Do you think it is pay-per-view worthy? Please let us know, because if anyone genuinely thinks this is pay-per-view, I'd love for you to explain to me why. But anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Leave some comments. Thank you.